Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. I just wanted to go over a few quick thoughts on some games that I played both last month in December or 2 months ago in December, as well as last month, January 2025. We'll start with December, and I did play a lot of games. I forgot how much this was in total, but Glass Road did take up a lot of that time. As previously mentioned in my strategy video, this was the month that I finished the Arena season and reached number 1 in Arena, as well as the number 1 overall player on Board Game Arena for Glass Road. So obviously a lot of time and effort was put into that, but I still got to play a lot of good games. I've talked about most of these, but I want to take a moment to speak on a few other games that I was not able to because of the time that I spent either playing some games in real life, such as Newsfjord, and I can't think of any of the other games that I had got to, like Rolling Realms redo as well. That was fun. Civolution as well. So let's get into some of the 3 games that I got to the table, or virtually got to the table, and have some thoughts on. So first is Rats of Wistar. So this was a game from 2023 by Simone Luciani, Danilo Sabia, and this game I give a 6.6 out of 10. Here are the reasons why. And so this game essentially is a very mechanically sound game with an interesting theme where you are rats. I believe the Rats of Wistar are lab rats that are, the breed of lab rats that are used in certain experiments. I don't know, I forget if they had escaped the lab or time has passed and they have become a little bit more sentient. But in this game, you have a rondel of actions that you take, and you place your worker on one of these spots to take a certain action, overall to gain resources to either spend it on cards that you purchase, to explore this house as well, and to upgrade your own personal tableau with buildings and upgrades and the like. So it's a very thematic game in the sense that it's very mechanically driven, such as games from similar designers like Tiletum or Tiletum, etc. In this game, I feel like there is more of a thematic intrigue to it with the rats and them kind of building their own little inventions, like a grapple hook, or you have this luxury hotel, things like that. So it's a pretty cute theme, and the mechanisms aren't as complex, I would say, as some of their previous designs. It's closer to Teletum than it is to, say, like Golem, which is a pretty complex game from these designers. But overall, it was a fun game, but not too memorable for me. There are other games mechanically that I would prefer to play rather than the mechanisms that are brought forth in this game. But this was played on Board Game Arena, so it is worth a try. Next is Gems of Iridescia. This is a 2025 game by Roberto Panetta, and in this game, also available on Board Game Arena, is quite a simple game where you are moving your token up this board full of tiles. You flip them over, you flip 2 over, and you can mine the certain types of minerals there and place them onto your tableau. These minerals serve as a resource to spend for these cards. They can serve as points as well as upgrades and tools to help you explore a little bit better. There's an element of dice rolls as well to tell you how many a certain type of mineral or resource you can acquire at a time, and for other things as well. And so it's a pretty straightforward game. I give it a 5.5, and here is why. It's pretty easy to learn, but ultimately I think the element of discovery of what those gems are that you are discovering for resources is of course luck driven, but it's interesting to kind of navigate through that and hopefully get the right resources that you need to fulfill the objectives and utilize tools to do so. So it's a good enough game, and it's worth a shot if you do like a more light to medium light complexity type of experience. Not in I guess, my wheelhouse personally, but it was interesting to try at least. And then finally in December is Ratjack. I heard about this game being touted on the Dice Tower rather, and so when I saw this was on alpha at the time, I think this game might be in beta or fully released, I forget. But Ratjack is a game that is based off of blackjack, where if you collect a certain hand of cards face down or face up here that go over 21, but I guess in this game it's over 25, then you bust and the other opponent wins. So the point of this game is to have less than 25 points, or a sum of less than 25 showing face up. And so it's easy enough to do. You draw a card, you have 2 in your hand, you choose one to play, very similar to like Love Letter, right? And each card, in addition to their value, they have certain effects. Like this one, where you discard the top 2 cards of the draw deck. You thin out, it's a very small deck, you thin it out, and I think that's another way to end the round is if this entire deck is drawn. You have the option to play a card face up or face down. If you play it face up, you get to utilize its effect. You also, have a card that you can draw from that is face up, if you would like. And there are a lot of ways to interact with your opponent by using these tokens to either place on your own cards to increase or decrease their value, to lock them in place to prevent them from being flipped, either face up or face down, because a lot of these cards are interactive, saying you may flip an opponent's card face up or face down, etc. So it is quite an interactive game. I give it a 6.4 out of 10 because it is, pretty easy to play, especially if you understand the basics of blackjack. But I think this game would be a little bit more fun in person, and because of not only the interactivity but also the social nature, where the game and the mechanisms kind of are simple enough that it leaves more room for banter and interaction socially around the table, as well as mechanically with some of the effects of the cards. So perhaps a little bit more fun if played in person, but you can still try it on Board Game Arena if you would like. And then that brings me to January 2025. If I remember right, I played about half the number of games that I did in December, mostly because Glass Road, I reached the end of the arena season and decided to take a break from the grind. And so I still play it occasionally, but I did get some other games to the table. Of note, I'm going to talk about Rise and Fall in a separate episode after this, because I have a lot of interesting thoughts about this game that I want to go into with more depth. And I already covered Great Western Trail El Paso and Plantanubo, for example, in past videos, and played some Nova Era as well, played some old favorites as well. But there were 2 games here that I wanted to talk about briefly. And the first is Dead Cells. This is a very anticipated game from last year, namely with Antoine Balza as a part of the designer team. Some of these other names, Théo Rivière, Ludovic Maublanc, are folks that I have seen in other popular games as well. You notice here that I did not rate this game very high, and I should give you some background. I have not played the video game. I don't have that experience to compare this with. I just know about what the game is about, essentially. It's a roguelike game, very similar in the vein of, I believe, Slay the Spire. Except in Slay the Spire, you have a more deck building and deck modulation type of experience where you rinse and repeat the combat that you elicit with your enemies. And in this game, there is an element of board progression where you kind of navigate this very simple dungeon and you stumble upon enemies, and you have a more programming type of experience. Like one board game that I played recently was Leviathan Wilds, which I enjoyed with Jacob. And in that game, there's a lot of programming with the cards that you have in your hand, and the same is found here. All in addition to having your own personal, faction or type of character that you can play with special powers. And in this game, You are expected to die pretty quickly. You have a pretty low health to start off with, and you may or may not be defeated quickly, and so you restart over, gain new abilities, perhaps you gain some more HP as well, and you continue through the dungeon until you can make it to the final boss and what have you. I think the most interesting part about this game is the programming. Once again, I don't know if this is a mechanism that is trying to replicate what the video game portrays, or if this is something unique in and of itself with the board game. But I did look at a lot of the comments on Board Game Geek in regards to this game. A lot of people, I feel, rated this game highly because they do enjoy either roguelite games in general or the video game as well. If that was one of their favorite games recently, then I think the board game was a hit for them. A lot of people did not have as good of a time. There were some component and rulebook issues, but also the gameplay itself doesn't really heighten in the same way as, say, Gloomhaven does. Now, I don't particularly enjoy Gloomhaven as much. I do enjoy the time that I've spent with my friends around a table of Gloomhaven, and that's a separate thing. But I feel like there is an element of discovery very similar to what you would see in a campaign or legacy type style game, where you have unlockable characters and dungeons and bosses and tools and equipment, etc. with this game, and so you can explore that and experience that, and I think it's really cool. But a lot of people had issues with how mundane, I suppose, or not exciting this game is on repeated plays. Some people might feel a little bit of the drudgery from having to rinse and repeat in roguelike fashion, going over the same thing over and over again with slightly better skills the next time. It may portray better in the video game format than it does in the cardboard analog version for some people, and I feel like I'm one of those people as well. And I think a big part of it, and here are specifically where I put those ratings, I don't have that thematic. I think it's very well thematically integrated, but I don't have that background enjoyment or positive bias, perhaps, to enjoy this game to its fullest. So that was, it may or may not be more exciting if I were to play this in person and get a couple of runs in with friends around the table. But playing this solo or playing this without communication on a Board Game Geek or Board Game Arena, it wasn't as exciting for me, and so that's probably why I rated this game somewhere in the middle, like as an average game. So take it as you will. It's not my style of game, but I did want to say what I thought and what I had to say about this game. Then I'll wrap it up with Diced Veggies. This is a 2023 game, and by the Capel brothers, maybe. I really enjoyed this game, I'll just say. Despite my, I guess, not as high score, I think this game was pretty easy to learn. I think it was a fairly fun game for how light it is, and pretty interesting with the way it is portrayed as a dice-driven game. And here's what I mean. So in this game, I believe in the physical game, it comes with like a plastic butcher's knife, or like a vegetable knife or so, and you cut out a portion of the dice here. You keep it up. Keep the color the same as well as the pips, and you have recipes that you're trying to fulfill using those colored portions of the dice. But also the numbers can come into play when you have these hype cards. For example, if you have 3 6s that you use in fulfilling a recipe, you can also score this hype card to gain extra points with it. And so you're kind of combining 2 different objectives at the same time as you draft these dice in an interesting way and in a quite thematic way as well. So I think this was thematically a very interesting light game that used, it kind of reminded me of a very simple version of the dice utilization and mechanisms that are seen in Woodcraft by Suhi. I really just liked the simple way that the dice were handled in this game. Of course, there's randomness as well, but you can try to mitigate as much as possible by drawing cards and hoping for the best, and using hype cards as well as alternate ways to score points. I had a lot of fun, and I would play this again. I guess when it comes to my favorite games of all time, it's harder for these lighter games to fulfill all bits of my criteria. But this is a really light game, and for what it is, I think this is very well portrayed and implemented mechanically and thematically as well. So this is, I think, worth a shot, and it's a recommendation from me. So that is it. I'll wrap it up there. Let me know if you've played these games and have the same or different opinions as me. Thank you for consulting with me, and hope to catch you on the next one. Take care.